Imagine waking up one morning with no visible wounds, no scars, no evidence that anything has gone wrong, yet feeling with absolute certainty that something inside you has been fighting a war you didn't know existed. It's not exhaustion from lack of sleep, nor sadness from a particular event. It's stranger than that, quieter, subtler. It's the feeling that your thoughts have been moving against you, not in an obvious betrayal, but in a slow, measured campaign, as if some part of your mind has been playing a game where you are the prize. This is not paranoia. It's not the stuff of conspiracy theories. The battlefield is real, but you can't see it, because it exists entirely within the folds of your own thinking. And here's the unsettling part. In this war, you are both the attacker and the defender. You are the strategist and the soldier. The war is not fought with swords or bullets, but with doubts, compromises, hesitations, and the quiet surrender of moments when you choose safety over truth. The enemy doesn't storm your gates. It wears your voice. It sounds like reason when it tells you not to take that risk. It sounds like kindness when it tells you to stay silent to keep the peace. It sounds like wisdom when it urges you to wait just a little longer before pursuing what matters to you. But what if those voices aren't wisdom at all? What if they're the soft artillery of a mental war that's been shaping your life without you realizing it? We like to imagine that the biggest threats to our lives are external, crises, losses, betrayals. But the truth is, the deadliest wars are the ones waged in silence, wars where there's no blood to warn you, no explosion to jolt you awake, only a gradual erosion of who you are. You see it in the person who once burned with ambition, now moving through life like they're keeping someone else's schedule. You see it in the smile that doesn't reach the eyes, in the laughter that feels like it belongs to another era. You see it in yourself, in the moments you can't explain why you're holding back, why you're not saying what's really in your heart. These are not random acts of hesitation. They are battle scars.
The paradox is this. You may win countless skirmishes in life, careers advanced, relationships maintained, reputations protected, yet still be losing the only war that truly matters, the fight to remain fully yourself. Because here's what no one tells you. Your mind, left unguarded, will fight for its own comfort over your truth. It will protect the familiar, even if the familiar is killing you. It will choose the known prison over the unknown freedom, because at least in the prison, it knows the rules. And so, bit by bit, the war is fought. You abandon certain dreams because they're impractical. You avoid certain risks because they're too much right now. You silence certain truths because it's not worth the trouble. Each choice feels small, harmless even, but over time, they form a pattern, a strategy of slow surrender. And the most dangerous part? You don't feel like you're losing. You feel like you're surviving. But surviving and living are not the same thing. You can survive a war without ever firing a shot, simply by retreating far enough that you're no longer on the battlefield. But when the battlefield is inside your mind, retreat means abandoning the parts of yourself that were worth fighting for in the first place. Which leaves us with the question you may not want to answer, but can't afford to ignore. If the war inside your mind is silent, and the enemy speaks in your own voice, how will you ever know if you're winning? More unsettling still, how will you know if you've already surrendered? The mind is clever enough to disguise surrender as peace and retreat as wisdom. It will let you believe you've avoided conflict, when in truth, you've avoided your own potential. And so the question becomes not just what you are fighting, but why you've been fighting in the first place, and whether you're fighting the right enemy at all. Because sometimes the silent war inside your mind isn't about destroying you. Sometimes it's about keeping you exactly where you are. And if that's true, then the next question is the most dangerous one of all. Who programmed your mind to fight this war? And what happens when you finally realize the battle was never yours to begin with? If the war inside your mind feels personal, it's because it is, yet it's also older than you. You didn't invent this conflict, you inherited it. From your earliest days, before you could even name your own thoughts, the architecture of your mental battlefield was being built. Parents, teachers, peers, media, culture, they all left fingerprints on your inner world. They taught you what was safe to say, what was acceptable to feel, and which parts of yourself were too dangerous to show. By the time you were old enough to think you were making your own choices, the blueprint was already set. The war you think is just you is, in truth, the echo of countless unseen forces. Psychology calls this conditioning. It's the process by which repeated experiences shape neural pathways in the brain, making certain thoughts automatic and certain behaviors instinctive. If you were rewarded for compliance as a child, compliance becomes your survival reflex. If you were punished for speaking up, silence becomes your armor. Over time, you don't even realize you're wearing it. Carl Jung called this the creation of the persona, the social mask you wear to navigate the world. Necessary? Yes, but also dangerous, because the more you identify with the mask, the more you forget the face beneath it. Jung warned that what you repress doesn't disappear, it becomes part of your shadow, the hidden aspects of yourself that influence your life from the dark. The silent war is largely a battle between the persona and the shadow. The persona wants to keep you acceptable. The shadow wants to keep you whole. Nietzsche saw this in a different light. To him, most people never truly live because they never challenge the values they were given. They accept inherited beliefs as truth, inherited fears as wisdom. They live by rules they never chose. This is why he spoke of the Übermensch, not as a superhuman, but as someone who creates their own values rather than obeying the ones handed down to them. The silent war is, in many ways, the struggle to become that person. Arthur Schopenhauer took an even bleaker view. He argued that human will is driven by endless desire, which inevitably leads to suffering. From his perspective, the war inside the mind isn't a bug, it's the system functioning exactly as intended. You're meant to fight yourself, to chase conflicting desires, to exhaust your energy in battles you can't win. That exhaustion keeps you compliant, and compliance is where the philosophical meets the political. Aldous Huxley, in Brave New World, warned not of a society that controls you with fear, but one that controls you with comfort and distraction. In his vision, people don't rebel because they don't even realize there's anything to rebel against. Entertainment, routine, and the illusion of choice keep them pacified. In reality, their minds are fighting wars they can't name. You can see this everywhere today. The person who numbs themselves with endless scrolling is fighting a war against boredom, but losing the deeper war for their attention. The person who stays in a job they hate to be responsible is fighting a war for stability, but losing the deeper war for purpose. The person who avoids hard conversations to keep the peace is fighting a war for harmony, but losing the deeper war for authenticity. Jean-Paul Sartre called this living in bad faith, lying to yourself to avoid the anxiety of freedom. Freedom means you could change your life, but that also means you are responsible for not changing it, and responsibility is heavy. So the mind convinces you it's better not to want too much, not to think too deeply, not to question too hard. This is the hidden root of the silent war. The mind is torn between two opposing drives. One is survival. Stay safe, keep the mask on, follow the rules. The other is self-realization. Strip off the mask, take the risk, live fully. Both drives believe they're acting in your best interest,
but they cannot both win. Over time, the survival drive usually wins by default, not because it's stronger, but because it's quieter. Self-realization demands leaps. Survival only asks for small surrenders. One risk avoided here, one truth unspoken there, and before you know it, the war has been decided without a single decisive battle. But here's the twist. The moment you see this war for what it is, the rules change. Awareness is a weapon. The forces shaping your mind, from childhood conditioning to cultural programming, thrive in the dark. Once they're in the light, they can no longer pretend to be you. Still, seeing is not the same as winning, because once you recognize the hidden problem, you also have to face the consequences of every battle you have already lost. And those consequences don't just live in your mind. They ripple through your choices, your relationships, your identity. Which leads to the next question. If the war inside your mind has been shaping your life without your consent, how many parts of your life are built on victories that were never yours?
It's like breathing polluted air for decades. You don't wake up one morning gasping from the toxins. You simply adapt, adjusting your expectations downward until you forget what clean air even feels like. The silent war breeds compromises so small you barely register them. You wanted to speak up in a meeting, but you didn't want to sound foolish. You wanted to ask that person out, but you didn't want to risk rejection. You wanted to start that project, but you told yourself the timing wasn't right. One by one, you surrender moments, and those moments add up. This is the first unseen consequence. You begin to confuse safety for happiness. You tell yourself you're content because you've avoided pain, not realizing you've also avoided growth, passion, and depth. Comfort becomes your prison. The second consequence is more insidious. You start living someone else's story. Your parents' dreams, your culture's definition of success, your peers' idea of what's normal. Every choice you make to avoid inner conflict is a vote for a version of you that exists only to be acceptable in someone else's eyes. And when you do occasionally feel restless, you soothe it with distractions, scrolling, shopping, streaming, anything to avoid confronting the fact that you don't actually know whose life you're living. This is where cognitive biases take over. Psychologists talk about confirmation bias, our tendency to seek out evidence that supports what we already believe. Once your mind accepts the idea that this is just how life is, you'll unconsciously filter reality to reinforce that belief. If you think risk is dangerous, you'll only notice stories of people who failed. If you think you're not creative, you'll only see proof of your mediocrity. The third consequence is emotional numbness. Not the absence of feelings, but a dampening of them. When you silence anger to keep the peace, you also silence joy. When you suppress fear to avoid vulnerability, you suppress excitement too. Over time, your emotional range narrows until everything feels muted, safe, predictable, and lifeless. Neuroscience shows us why. The brain doesn't have a selective mute button for emotions. Suppressing the ones you don't like inevitably dulls the ones you do. This is why people who spend years avoiding pain often describe feeling empty rather than happy. And here's the fourth consequence, the one that truly cements the trap. You normalize the war. It becomes the background noise of your life. The hesitation before speaking, the second guessing after acting, the quiet guilt for not doing enough. It all starts to feel natural. You stop noticing that you're at war at all. Culturally, this normalization is reinforced by the very systems that benefit from your compliance. Advertisements whisper that you're incomplete without their product, keeping
You're locked in the loop of desire, Schopenhauer warned about. Social media trains you to curate a persona so polished that even you start believing it. Workplaces reward endurance over authenticity, making burnout feel like a badge of honor rather than a warning sign. In this way, the war inside your mind becomes a self-sustaining machine. You feel uneasy, so you seek comfort. Comfort leads to stagnation. Stagnation deepens the unease. And because you've adapted to it, you mistake this cycle for life itself. But here's the most chilling realization. The longer this goes on, the more it changes the very structure of your brain. Neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to rewire itself, works both ways. Just as you can build new empowering habits, you can also hardwire fear, avoidance, and self-doubt into your neural circuitry. Avoidance practiced for decades doesn't just feel natural, it becomes your default operating system. By the time you notice, the cost is staggering. Relationships lack depth because you've never shown your full self. Career paths feel hollow because they were never truly yours. Even your private moments feel strange because you've forgotten how to be alone with the raw, unfiltered you. It's no exaggeration to say that the silent war can steal your life without you ever realizing it was gone. And when people finally do wake up, often after a crisis, a loss, or an inexplicable emptiness, they look back and wonder, when exactly did I stop living and start surviving? The answer is rarely one big moment. It's in the 1,000 little choices where you sided with safety over truth, comfort over growth, acceptance over authenticity. And yet, there is a crack in this armor. Because if you're reading this now and feeling the weight of these consequences, it means part of you hasn't given up the fight. There's still a rebel inside you, tired, maybe, but unbroken. The next question isn't just how do you fight back? It's deeper. It's how do you fight back without becoming just another prisoner of your own rebellion? Because breaking free isn't about chaos, it's about conscious revolution. And every revolution begins with a dangerous, liberating idea that you are not who you've been taught to be. The Rebellion. How to break free.
Rebellion doesn't start with fire in the streets or smashing the walls of your life with reckless abandon. It begins in the smallest, quietest corner of your mind, the moment you stop believing that your thoughts are facts. The war you've been fighting is not against an external oppressor, but against the unquestioned narratives you've been carrying for years. And here's the radical truth. You can't win a war you don't understand. So before you march toward freedom, you must first step into stillness. Close your eyes. Listen. Notice the voice that tells you you're too late, too old, too ordinary. The one that says, that's just the way you are, or people like you don't do things like that. It's tempting to argue with it, to drown it out with affirmations. But rebellion starts by recognizing the voice for what it is. Not a truth teller, but a guard posted at the gates of your potential. Carl Jung once said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. This is the first step in your rebellion. Drag the silent war into the light. Write down every limiting belief, every repeated fear, every rule you've been living by. Do not judge them, just see them. Because you can't dismantle the prison if you don't know its architecture. The second step is counterintuitive. Stop trying to win the war in one strike. Your mind loves the idea of grand transformations, the midnight decision to quit your job, the sudden move to a new city, the vow to start fresh. But here's the trap. Massive change often triggers massive resistance. Your brain, wired for survival, treats uncertainty like danger, pulling you back into old patterns before the dust settles. Instead, you dismantle the war brick by brick. Take one small action that contradicts your conditioning. Speak your opinion in a room where you normally stay silent. Say no to something you don't want to do without explaining yourself. Spend 5 minutes on a dream you've been too busy to start. These small acts may seem insignificant, but they are psychological detonations. Each one sends a message to your brain. The old rules no longer apply. And the more you repeat them, the more your neural pathways change, not by force, but by proof.
Philosophical shift. Rejection is not evidence of your unworthiness. It's evidence that you are no longer living in submission. Think of history's most transformative figures: Socrates, Galileo, Rosa Parks. Every single one was rejected, ridiculed, or condemned before being celebrated. Your rebellion will not be universally applauded. It's not meant to be. Fourth, replace avoidance with confrontation. Every fear you avoid grows in the shadows. Every fear you confront shrinks in the light. This is not about reckless exposure. It's about calculated courage. If you're afraid of public speaking, start with a 2-minute share in a small group. If you're afraid of intimacy, tell someone one thing you've never admitted before. Fear doesn't disappear by thinking about it. It dissolves by meeting it in controlled doses until it loses its grip on you. Fifth, stop waiting to feel ready. Readiness is a myth. It's the mind's way of delaying risk while pretending it's being practical. You weren't ready for your first heartbreak, your first job, your first major loss, and yet you survived. You grow into readiness by doing, not by waiting. Sixth, create a philosophy of self-ownership. Without it, your rebellion will fizzle out under pressure. Decide now. What values are worth discomfort to you? What truths will you protect even when they cost you relationships, security, or approval? What will you no longer negotiate about yourself? Write these down as your personal manifesto, not for Instagram, not for applause, just for you. When the war inside you flares up again, you'll have a compass to navigate through the noise. And seventh, the most crucial of all, learn to hold paradox without panic. Freedom is not the absence of struggle, it's the ability to live fully even while struggle remains. You can be afraid and still move forward. You can feel doubt and still act with conviction. You can acknowledge the war without letting it dictate your life. Viktor Frankl, who endured the horrors of a Nazi concentration camp, wrote, "Everything can be taken from a man, but one thing, the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances." Your rebellion will not end the war, but it will give you the power to decide how you fight, where you fight, and what you fight for. And in that choice lies the first taste of real freedom. At first, the world may not notice the changes. The old habits will try to pull you back. The people who benefited from your compliance may resent your new boundaries. But one day, you'll wake up and realize that the war is no longer the loudest thing in your head. There's space now. Space for ideas you'd once dismissed, for dreams you'd shelved, for parts of yourself you'd buried. And here's the thing you'll discover in that silence. You were never meant to win the war. You were meant to stop being its soldier. From here, there's only one question left. If the war is no longer your master, then who are you really? That's where we step into the final revelation, the truth that changes everything.